Hello, I'm Jeff Power, senior writer with RealTime Fantasy Sports, and welcome to another edition of the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. It's week 17, so that means we're in championship weeks, and I am thrilled to be joined by my son once again, Henry Power. Henry, thanks so much for coming on the stream with me today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, Henry, should be an exciting week of games. We're in championship week. Not as many games throughout the week like last week, where we had several on Saturday, some on Friday, some on Thursday. We just have one game on Saturday, one game tonight. And then every game is on Sunday. There's no Monday night game because of the holiday, but either way, should be a lot of fun this week. Super exciting. How many championships have you made, Henry?
I'm in 3 at the moment. Should be a fun week. And also, it's not just a lot of playoff implications just for the NFL in general this week, too.
Yep, exactly. A lot of great games on the line. You're actually going to the Colts Texans game next week, which could mean a playoff spot as well. That should be pretty exciting.
Mhm.
They're two up and coming teams. You excited about that game?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, should be good. Hopefully, CJ Stroud comes back this week and helps them. On today's show, Henry and I, we're going to help you get ready for your games, help you win your championship. So, we're going to give you 5 of our favorite plays for the week. So, guys, we really think are great starts, must starts, 5 fades, guys, we're worried about this week, and then 5 sleepers. So, maybe some people you need to make some starts because of injury or whatever. Unfortunately, injuries have been absolutely awful this year. Even last week, again, Henry, some players went down during games like Cortland Sutton, Jalen Waddle. I mean, that absolutely kills you when that happens, right?
Yeah, it almost lost my game last week at Hawkinson and Waddle, and they went down. I could have used those extra points to win that game, but I ended up squeaking out in the end, though.
Yeah, Hawkinson too. Another guy went down. He's actually number one in fantasy tight end scoring, which I was a little bit surprised by, but he's ahead of Travis Kelsey right now. So he's had a phenomenal season. While Kelsey hasn't been quite as good, unfortunately. Hopefully Hawkinson can come back sooner than later next year and be ready to go for the start of the season. You never know with those ACL injuries, though. Either way, Hawkinson had a great year, but he's going to kill a lot of fantasy teams in the finals. Unfortunately, you got any good backup plans there for your tight end with Hawkinson out?
Yeah, I have one that I'll discuss later for my sleeper for the week, but I won't mention it now.
There you go, little tease. Good job, Henry. There, and also, I wanted to talk about. So, your high school actually does a fantasy football league, which is pretty cool in my opinion.
Mhm.
Branching out a little bit, and you made it to the final of that one. You excited about that?
I am. I really like the team. I had a great regular season. I think it went 12-2, so hopefully I win the championship in that one.
Yeah, who would have thought after all these years that high schools are actually running fantasy leagues? It's not for money, it's just for fun, just for pride, but still pretty cool to see it branching out into the school system there and getting kids involved in fantasy at a young age. I like that. So good luck to you in your final there. I made a lot of finals as well, Henry. I've had a really good year, and I feel like the common theme for me is Raheem Mostert. I have him on a lot of teams. He's just been phenomenal this year. I didn't see it coming from him, but he's finding the end zone on a regular basis. He's just been unbelievable. You have any common themes with players on your teams?
Not really, but I think a lot of them have a big thing to do with having an elite wide receiver core. I think that was a big thing this year. You need a true number one and a true number two. That's been a big thing. Like Tyreek Hill, Jefferson when he's healthy. There's been a lot of things like that that you need on your team this year.
Yeah, and then the running back spot has been just a jumbled mess after Raheem Mostert and Christian McCaffrey. There's a lot of guys with similar points, so I think you're right. If you have one of those elite receivers that produce big on a weekly basis, it's been a bit of a difference maker this year. And that and having McCaffrey, which is crazy, he has over 100 points more than Mostert, which is just a crazy weekly difference in fantasy points. So he's been definitely a difference maker for teams this year. And as always, Henry, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We're happy to answer them for you. If you have any of those championship lineup questions, we're more than happy to give you our advice and give you our thoughts on those lineup questions for you this week. I actually have one for tonight, Henry. I don't know what to do with Joe Flacco. He could be without Amari Cooper. Nick Mullins is my backup. He's up in the air as well. I had Justin Herbert, absolutely killed me. I'm actually picking up Jacoby Brissett. So I'm going to have 3 players. I don't know what I'm going to do. You have any thoughts on that? Flacco, Brissett, Mullins, what would you do?
Now, I will have some stuff I want to talk about Flacco later, but For now, Mullins is a good matchup this week if Green Bay just allowed 30 points to Carolina last week, who may have one of the worst offenses in football. So he could have a huge game, I feel like. And with Jacoby, he's looked good when he's had his time in games so far. Another player I also like this week would be Terry McLaurin because of what he's done with Jacoby on the field. But he does play San Francisco. Iffy situation there. Could turn the ball over a little bit. I worry about him. I probably lean towards Mullins.
Yeah, my thing with Brissett, I think they're going to be playing from behind and having to throw the ball a lot. They're going to get blown out, so maybe he piles up yards in garbage time. So that's one reason why I kind of like him. And Mullins worries me about getting benched because they still haven't named a starter yet. So if he has any issues, another turnover, he's had some bad ones, maybe they'll bench him. So a little bit of a concern there. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm worried about Flacco though if Cooper doesn't play. It's just word came out this morning about that where he's up in the air. I don't know if you saw that, but that's not good.
Yeah.
All right, Henry. Let's talk about five of our favorite plays for this week. So I'll let you give your first one, and then I'll go, and then we'll just go back and forth. So who's your favorite? Your first favorite play of the week?
I have DeAndre Swift. He just came off one of his best games of the year last week, and I plays against Arizona, who's the third worst against the run. It seems like they're giving them more goal line and short yardage situations around the goal line this like I did last week, so he might get more touchdowns. And he racked up a ton of yards last week late in the game. I think he could do that again this week, and even early on with how bad of a run defense this is. I think Swift has a huge game.
Yeah, they're starting to get him a little more involved, which is good news for him. He had a great start to the season, kind of faded out here of late, but I agree. I like him as well. So one of my favorite plays, another running back, Rashad White. He's playing as well as any fantasy back in the game right now, in my opinion. He's up to third overall in fantasy running back scoring. He has touchdowns 4 straight games, at least 13 fantasy points, 10 straight games. So his floor is just super high. He gets catches, he gets goal line carries, he has no competition for work. He has at least his I should say his consistency has just been off the charts. I think he'll keep it going this week against the Saints. They've struggled against the run recently because of injuries at linebacker and in the secondary at safety. They've allowed at least 125 rushing yards, 7 of their last 8 games. So I think White keeps it going, has another big game in week 17. All right, Henry, give me another one of your favorite plays.
I have Brock Purdy. I know he's coming off probably his worst game of the year last week, 4 interceptions. But he gets Washington now, has a horrific defense. He could pile on a ton of yards this week. They have a decent run defense. I could see them really throwing the ball and airing it out this game, getting Purdy's confidence back. He was an MVP favorite before this. He didn't do that just lightly. He's probably going to throw for a ton of touchdowns and a ton of yards this week.
Yeah, I agree. Don't get scared off by last week. I know he has that stinger as well, but he's already practicing in full. So I like that. Don't get scared from last week. Just a super matchup for him. I'd get all 49ers involved as I'll give you my next player, and it's actually a 49er. It's Brandon Ayuk. He has 100-yard games 2 of his last 3. He has double-digit fantasy points all but 3 games this season, which is crazy. So he's been really consistent, just like Rashad White. I think he's going to post big numbers in this high-powered offense this week. Like you mentioned, Washington's terrible against the pass. They actually allow the second most fantasy points to receivers this season, 31st overall against the pass. I think Ayuk keeps it going, and that Purdy and Ayuk connection is a good one this week. I know Samuel's really been good down the stretch, but I think Ayuk is set up for a really big finish as well. He's really looked good the last couple weeks like he had earlier in the season. So I think he keeps it going, has a big week 17. All right, Henry, give me another one of your favorite plays.
I have Rasheed Rice. They play Cincinnati this week. He's the 10th worst against the pass. He could have a huge week. You saw what he's done in recent weeks. Last week, I think, was a little bit of a down week, but his recent weeks, he's had huge numbers 20-plus points, scoring touchdowns and over 100 yards. I think he does that here easily in a game where they're going to try to air it out and get that offensive confidence back after last week.
Yeah, I agree. A little shaky. That's your favorite team, the Chiefs, and unfortunately haven't been playing very well of late. I think it's a good get right matchup for them. It's a tough one. Should be a good game, but like you said, Rice has been really good lately, so I think that's a good call there as well. I'll give you a receiver too that I like this week again, following up on Ayuk. I like Chris Olave a lot. Returned from his ankle injury. Some people might have been scared to use him, but he caught 9 passes for 123 yards on 13 targets last week. Looked just fine in that game, in my opinion. I think he's a must start going forward just because of his production all season. 100-yard games, 3 of the last 4 he's played. He's found the end zone 3 of 6 games as well. He's the top target in this passing game, gets a lot of weekly work. He has a high floor, gets a Bucks team this week that allows the fourth most fantasy points to receivers. They're dead last against the pass. They're good against the run, the Bucks, but man, they struggle against the pass. And I think Olave has a huge game this week. All right, Henry, give me another one of your favorite plays.
I have Jonathan Taylor. Came back from injury last week, and there may be no Zach Moss this week, but he plays Vegas, who's the 10th worst against a run in the league. He could have a huge week because I think they could get up big in this game and just pound the rock with Jonathan Taylor. We see what he does when he's healthy. He's going to have a huge week this week, and he's going to help you win your championship.
I like that. I have Taylor on a couple of my teams, so I hope you're right there. Definitely could happen. Uh, Raiders are playing better of late, but Colts are at home here and a must-win game for them as well if they want to keep their playoff hopes alive. I think the Raiders still have a slim chance, don't they?
Yes, they have to win out, I believe, and they'll have a lot of teams lose. So
Yeah,
it's
they
not
have to, a
best
lot to
chances.
happen. What do you think about that coaching job of Antonio Pierce? Oh, man, he's been outstanding.
He's been great. He's beat the Chiefs last week. That's a huge win, and he blew out the Chargers. I mean, it's Brandon Staley, but I mean, he's been great for that team. I would not be shocked if they hire him long term after this season.
Yeah, it would seem like that's what they're going to have to do. It just makes too much sense, but it's the Raiders, so you never know what they're going to do. They make some crazy decisions at times. All right, Henry, I'll give you another one of my favorite plays this week, and that's Matthew Stafford. I think I had him on my list last week as well when I talked about 5 of my favorite plays, but he's been outstanding. He is 4th overall in fantasy quarterback score in his last 3 games. He has 5 straight games with 20-plus fantasy points, multiple touchdowns all 5 of those games. Rams offense just playing really good right now. Cooper Kupp's healthy. Even Demarcus Robinson's playing well. Is also as a number 3, kind of moved past Tutu Atwell. You have Puka Nakua's been outstanding, but Stafford's been distributing the ball, doing a great job. He gets the Giants this week. They allow the 14th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, 21st overall against the pass. So I think Stafford's a top 10 quarterback again this week, a good number 1. So if you got him, I'd play him, especially with all the people hurt at quarterback this year. Uh, it's been crazy. All the people have been injured, and I think Stafford's a legit number 1 at this point. All right, Henry, give me your last hot play, favorite play of the week.
I have Aaron Jones. He just had one of his best rushing games of the year. Maybe not his best fantasy performance, but he had 135 total yards, only had 1 catch. But he gets Minnesota this week, who last week allowed 170 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns to Detroit. He could have a huge blow-up game this week in a championship after what he did last week. If he gets a touchdown work, plus what he did last week with his numbers rushing-wise, he could have a huge week.
Yeah, I like that too with Jones. I'm finally confident in him again. He's getting carries, a lot of carries. Like when he came back the first couple times, he's been splitting work with Dylan, but not so much the case anymore. I feel much better about playing him.
Mhm.
You have him on one of your teams, I think. Is that
I
correct?
do. I hoping he has a huge week. I believe he does with the matchup he's primed with this week too. Because I believe they're also up in this game with Nick Mullins and the Vikings not looking too good as of recent.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I'll give you a running back too as my last favorite play of the week. That's James Conner. So he's been one of the few bright spots for me for a bad Cardinals team. He's 6th overall in fantasy running back score in his last 3 games. Been really good since he's come back from injury. He has at least 17 points all 3 of those games. He tied his season high with 5 catches last week. So that's really encouraging to me when he gets those catches in the offense. Hasn't always been the case this year, but I think he could rack up the catches this week against the Eagles. Playing from behind, Eagles bad against the pass. He could get a lot of work in the passing game. So I like his chances to rack up the touches, the catches in this game. I think he'll produce well once again here. So don't get too scared of that matchup. I think the Eagles really want to come out and play a game where they blow somebody out, get their confidence going. But either way, I like his chances to do well here. All right, Henry, let's talk about the opposite end of things now. Let's talk about fades, guys we're kind of scared of. And also, as always, as I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the chat. We're happy to answer anything and help you win your games. But let's talk about some fades now, Henry. Some players you're kind of scared of this week. Who tops your list?
So my first one is a little bit of one that could come back to bite me in the end, but I have Brees Hall. I know he's coming off his best game of the year last week, but it's supposed to be bad weather tonight and the best run defense in football probably is what they're playing against. I have not much faith in him this week to have a huge week, especially in bad conditions. He might not be able to get as many checkdowns as he usually does, but you never know.
Yeah, you're right. You never know what's going to happen with him. I mean, 2 weeks ago, was it 6 carries for 12 yards? Just an
Yep.
awful game for him. So he's capable. You never know what's going to happen there. It's scary when you have these star players on bad teams. And actually, ironically, a Jet tops my list. It's not Brees Hall, it's Garrett Wilson. So he's still been producing despite decent. Uh, uh, still producing decent numbers despite poor quarterback play. Hit the 100-yard mark last week. He was targeted a season high 15 times in that game, but that was against the Commanders. We just talked about them, how we like the 49ers this week because of that. But Wilson struggled against better pass defenses this year. He has fewer than double-digit fantasy points 2 of his last 4 games and 3 of 6. So he's been up and down. Now he gets the Browns. You mentioned bad weather. Browns also third fewest fantasy points to receivers allowed. So Wilson kind of scares me. It's hard to bench him because he's Garrett Wilson. He's talented. He could get some targets here, but I actually think this could be a close game, especially if Amari Cooper doesn't play. So that worries me with Wilson as well. Maybe not having to throw the ball as much as they try to control the clock a little bit. So I'm worried about Wilson this week. So Henry and I do not like the Jets, as you can see. So you might want to fade them this week. All aspects of their game, running and throwing the ball. All right, Henry, give me another one of your fades.
I had T. Higgins. I know he's coming off a huge game last week, and there's a chance there's no Jamar Chase this week. But looking back at it, if you look last week, all his production came off that one big touchdown play. That was his longest touchdown of his career. And now this week he gets Kansas City, who allowed a very bad week to Devontae Adams last week. They did not allow many yards at all to that Raiders offense. And Browning hasn't looked the best ever lately. I'd be worried about T. Higgins against this KC defense.
All right. You do not like T. Higgins. I'm going to give you a star player as well that I don't like. That's Tony Pollard. So, in my opinion, he's been one of the biggest fantasy disappointments this season. He was a first round pick in most leagues. He still ranks 13th overall in fantasy running back scoring. That's been skewed by some really big games. He's had some terrible games along the way. 2 straight games with fewer than 8 fantasy points and fewer than double digit points 7 times this year. I know I have too much stock of Pollard. He's just been a real disappointment for me. And I don't think those huge games have outweighed the really bad ones because he's had a lot of bad ones. I think it could happen this week against the Lions. They allow the fewest fantasy points to running backs. They rank 4th overall against the run as well. So I'm worried about Pollard. And again, hard to sit him because he has a high ceiling. But man, I just don't know if he's going to have a big game again here. I just think his floor could be pretty low, unfortunately. All right, Henry, give me another one of those fades on your list.
I have Evan Ingram. He plays Carolina as a 29th against the pass, and there's a good chance that I believe Trevor Lawrence does not play this week. So maybe without their star QB, and they have to CJ Beathard, who it's a little risky with Evan Ingram. He's had some bad weeks this year, too. I know he had a good week last week, but he's had some bad weeks in his year. I mean, I think this could be one of them.
All right. Evan Ingram's been playing well, but you're right. The Panthers pretty good against the pass. They've been pretty good defensively overall. It's just their offense kind of hurts them by not being on the field very long and wearing them out. But overall, they got a pretty good defense. You're right. CJ Beathard, if he's starting, I'm scared of all Jaguars except for Travis Etienne. I think he could have a big game if Beathard starts, get a lot more work running the ball, maybe get some dump offs as well. I have another huge star on my list here for fades. Again, tough to sit him, but Tua Tagovailoa, he had a good game last week, 293 yards, a touchdown. He still scored just 18.65 fantasy points, though, so that's not very good despite the Dolphins winning. So he's playing fine, but his fantasy numbers just haven't been great. I don't think people realize how much they run the ball. They really are a run heavy team at times, especially when they get up. But Tua has fewer than 20 fantasy points, 3 straight games in 4 of his last 5. That's not good. That's not helping fantasy teams. Sure, his floor is fine. He gets you around that 17, 18 mark on a weekly basis, but he has not had those blow up games. And I don't see it happening this week against the Ravens. They've been just tremendous. They shut down Brock Purdy last week in that high-powered offense. They allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks as well. So I'm fading Tua this week. If you have some options you can stream, guys like Stafford has a good matchup. Even Jordan Love has been playing really well. I might consider them at this point over Tua just because I'm worried about this matchup. Numbers have not been great as well. So again, kind of hard to fade a guy like that on that type of offense, but I just don't have a lot of faith in him at this point. All right, Henry, give me another one of your fades.
Also, another thing to add on the Tua thing, he may be without Jalen Waddle as well, which is also a
That's
big
true.
loss at offense. But my next one is, and man, I believe they talked about earlier, is Joe Flacco against the Jets. I know he's been elite, but he hasn't faced a top end defense yet, and now he's facing the best against QBs this year. It could be a real uphill battle for Flacco this week.
Yeah, I'm worried about him as well. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to decide if I should start him. Could be without Amari Cooper. Just a lot of things going against him at this point, which kind of really scares me, unfortunately. I don't know what I'm going to do with him at this point. It's hard to bet against him, though. He came off the couch. He's been tremendous. Just crazy how good he's been playing. But you're right. Tough matchup, tough weather. A little bit scary for this week. All right, I'll give you another one of my fades, Henry. It's Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills. He had a great stretch of games in the middle of the season, looked tremendous. He's really cooled since then, though. He caught just a pass last week. Didn't catch a pass the previous game as well. I mean, it's just hard to trust that at this point of the season in championship games. He's been targeted just 4 times his last 2 games as well. Gabriel Davis had a big game last week finally, so he got more looks than Kincaid. Dawson Knox is back, maybe cutting into his playing time a little bit. He gets the Patriots as well this week. They're really good defensively, even though their offense is terrible, and they do well against the tight end. New England allows the 3rd fewest fantasy points at tight ends, so that scares me as well. So I'd go with another option at tight end at this point. I just think Kincaid is a big risk and is scary at this point of the year. Henry, we got a question in the chat. Couple defenses we like this week. Any defenses you like? Maybe some streaming options at all? Anybody
I like the
stand out to you?
Jaguars against Carolina this week. I think that's a great streaming option. I also have KC against Cincinnati is another decent one.
Yeah, I like the Jags. That's a good call playing a bad team. I actually think the Colts are a little underrated. They've been piling up some points of late. They get Las Vegas. I know Vegas won last week, but I don't think they scored an offensive touchdown, if I'm correct, right? Yeah,
They did not.
they did not score an offensive touchdown. So I think the Colts have been playing some pretty good defense lately. They're at home here, so I don't think they're a bad defensive streaming option. Another one too could be Chicago. They're not as heavily owned. They're rostered in just 34.8% of leagues on our site. They have double-digit fantasy points 4 of their last 5 games. They play Atlanta, who has not been great offensively this year. All sorts of struggles. Tyler Heineke starting at QB, so I think, the Bears, Colts could be some good streaming options. I like your
I have
Jaguars
another one.
call. What's that?
I have another one. The
All right.
Rams who play the Giants this week. I think that could also be a very good one.
Yep, I agree. Tyrod Taylor starting at QB. Rams haven't been great defensively, but they got dropped in a lot of leagues. They're owned in
Mm.
just 21% of leagues on our site. So there's definitely some good streaming options there this week. So it's a good question. Everybody likes streaming defenses as well. I think it's a good strategy at this time of the year. So I think there are some options out there this week. So good luck to you out there if you're looking for a defense. All right, Henry, we have one more fade, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
Can you give me your last fade?
So I have basically the whole Commanders running back room. I don't know who's starting really. I believe Chris Rodriguez is banged up. I know Brian
He just
Robinson's
got
been
put on
banged up.
injured reserve. It just came out
Okay.
like 2 minutes before our stream started.
Okay, so that hurts. And then Brian Robinson started to practice again, but I'd be a little worried. Hamstring injuries are one that be very cautious with, especially where they're at in this year. They may not rush him back at this point. So probably Antonio Gibson, I would assume, gets workload. But they played San Francisco, who's been the 22nd best against the run and fantasy running backs. And they're going to be down in this game, I'm sorry to say. They're not going to have a chance to run the ball. And they get a couple dump offs, but I cannot see this being a good matchup for Gibson or whoever starts.
Yeah, I was intrigued by Gibson when Robinson was hurt, but he hasn't done much. His highest game was 11 points in week 13 when Robinson was out. I thought he'd get more work in the passing game, but he has not topped 40 receiving yards since week 10. Has not been very good. Like you said, Robinson could be back this week. Those hamstring injuries are scary. It's a tough matchup as well. I like that call to sit that receiving room. Running back room, I should say. I have a running back as well that I'm fading this week. It's Gus Edwards. My opinion, he's just a touchdown dependent player for fantasy teams. He's not going to get the yards. The good news is he has been scoring. He has touchdowns 2 straight games, 7 of 9 as well. but he had just 31 rushing yards last week and fewer than 35 rushing yards 3 or 4 games. I just don't think he finds the end zone this week against the Dolphins, making him a risky play. Miami allows the fifth fewest fantasy points to running backs, giving up just 13 rushing touchdowns all season as well. So if they're going to run it in, I think it's going to be Lamar Jackson. I don't like Gus Edwards this week. I just think when you're in the championship game, you don't want to just play it safe. You want to go all out, try to score as many points as you can. So that worries me a little bit, depending on a touchdown dependent player. Henry, let's talk a little bit about lineups when it comes to championship before we get to our sleepers, though. Like any strategies you like to employ, anything you like to do. Like I just said, I think you want to go big. I don't think you want to play it safe. You got to try to score as many points as you can. What's your thoughts on
Yeah, I
championship
agree.
lineup?
That's a strategy you're gonna have to use. Like this week, I gotta really figure that out in my one league. I had Hawkinson and Waddle go down, so I gotta figure out who I can start. Just gonna have these huge weeks, hopefully that I have to depend on.
Yep, for sure. I just think you want to maximize your points as well. So if there's a kicker, if you've had a great kicker all year, and he's been playing well, but he has a tough matchup this week, might not score as many points. I mean, drop him. You only have one other team you're competing with to pick up a player. Defense as well. So I still think Baltimore, they've been great defensively, and I know it's a tough matchup against Miami, but I still think I would go with them. But some other defenses that have been really good this year, and you're worried about their matchup this week. I'm fine with just dropping them, picking up somebody to stream, like we mentioned. Players like teams like the Colts and even the Raiders have played well defensively. So you need to maximize your points. So any way you can to get as many points as you can on your roster is a way to go. And I think you don't want to play it safe. You want to try to win your league and score as many points as you can. And look at your opponent's roster as well. I think that you want to see what you're up against. Try to see what they're doing, what they're thinking, and try to set your lineup as well. Trying to look at what they're doing to maximize your points and win your championship. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we get to our sleepers. And like I mentioned, you need to maximize your points. I think some of these sleepers we are going to talk about are guys that could be big this week. So could be some guys to consider on your team. So give me your first sleeper for the week, Henry.
I have one of the people I talked about earlier who I'm gonna be using at tight end this week as a replacement for Hawkinson. I have Gerald Everett. He has 3 straight pretty good games with Easton Stick playing quarterback. He gets a lot of targets with him under center. I mean, he faces the worst team for against fantasy tight ends in the league in Denver this week. I think they could be actually probably not going to be down with Jared Stidham starting, but he could be in a close one, and I could see him getting a lot of work. If he gets a touchdown that's going along with the performance he's had, he could have a great week for fantasy tight ends.
Yeah, I like Everett. I actually have picked him up in a league and is going to start him because I had Kincaid and he's been playing for me as a starter, but I don't trust him anymore. So I'm going with Everett. I think he could be a good play this week as well. I don't think his ceiling's super high, but I like his floor at the tight end position. Again, tight end position is not going to score as well as some other ones. So you want a good floor at tight end, in my opinion, especially in the championship game. So I think he's a good start there. And my first sleeper for the week's KJ Osborne. I absolutely love him this week. Jordan Addison's banged up, might not play. TJ Hawkinson done for the year as well. So Osborne's going to play a bigger role in the offense either way, even if Addison does play. And he had one of his best games of the season last week. 5 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown on 7 targets. Scored a season high 20.5 fantasy points. He gets a Packers team, as you mentioned earlier, really reeling a little bit lately defensively, especially against a pass. They've allowed 295 plus passing yards 2 straight and 3 of 5 games. So I think Osborne's a good play in this matchup. It could be a good guy to go off in week 17. We do have a question in the chat about Stephon Diggs. Are you fading him? That is a really tough call. I mean, he has less than 50 yards 3 straight games, has less than double-digit fantasy points 5 of 6 games. So he's been really bad, unfortunately. Are you fading him?
Man, it's a tough decision. I saw something yesterday about this. Diggs in the first half of the year, the last 2 years, is averaging around 18 plus points. In the second half of the year, he's averaging below 10. It's very
Whew.
interesting to see that, but I mean, Diggs, it's hard to bench him if you're going into a championship game because you did draft him probably in the first round. So it's hard to bench your first round pick at this late of the year. But I guess, I mean, it's your decision at that point. I would probably lean towards just starting him because I feel like you have to. Last time the Bills played the Patriots, they were behind and had to pass the ball a lot and to get back in that game. I could see him getting a lot of work in this game still.
Yeah, I don't like him, the way he's played lately, as for the reasons you mentioned too, he's been fading in the second half. Man, I just have a hard time sitting him. He's still at 8 targets last week, even though he scored just 7.9 fantasy points, so he's getting the looks. I think I'd stick with him unless you have a really good option on your bench. I just think I think he has too high of a ceiling. He scored 17.8 fantasy points against New England in week 7 as well, so he did not have a bad game against them earlier this season, so I think I'd stick with him. It's tough seeing him fade, like he has. It's kudos to you, though, for making it to the championship if you have Diggs, though, because that means the rest of your team's really firing on all cylinders because he is not right now, so hopefully he comes back, pairs with the rest of your team that's playing well, obviously, and has a big week 17. So I think I'd stick with him. All right, Henry,
Another,
let's talk about go ahead.
yeah, another thing about Diggs that I wanted to mention is last week Allen missed him on a deep ball where he was pretty much almost wide open. He very much underthrew it. So he could have really much had a big game still last week. You got to lean towards starting him, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Henry, give me another one of your sleepers for the week.
I have Rashid Shaheed versus Tampa. He was the fourth worst against the pass against fantasy receivers. And last week he had a pretty good week when they were playing from behind, having to pass ball a lot. Even with Olave still having huge numbers, he scored a touchdown, had 50-plus yards. I could see him doing similar numbers again this week. He's Carr's favorite deep ball threat, it seems. I think you have a big one in this one, especially because I believe Michael Thomas will still not be back this week.
Yeah, Michael Thomas is still banged up. Your favorite receiver there, Henry, Michael Thomas. Burnt him in the past. Henry's not a fan. Not a fan, right?
No, I hate him.
Yeah, we're piling up on Saints this week. We like this matchup. I mean, the Bucks have played well. They've surprised me this year, but they're not good against the pass. And that's a reason I like Derek Carr. He's actually on my sleeper list. Again, a lot of injuries at QB. You have to look at other options. I think Carr's could be a top 10 option this week. He had a season high 29.15 fantasy points last week. He has 2 straight 3 touchdown games, multiple scores, 3 straight games. He's been really heating up at a good time for fantasy owners. Olave's back. He has Shaheed, like you mentioned. They're not running the ball very well. Now he faces a Bucks team's good against the run, but not the pass. They allow the 5th most fantasy points to QBs. They're dead last against the pass as well. So I think that Carr is a really good play in this matchup. All right, Henry, give me another one of your sleepers of the week.
I have Romeo Doubs versus Minnesota. Minnesota is the 8th worst against the pass this year. They still had a big week to Amon Ra last week, and now I believe there might be no Christian Watson or Jaden Reed. And this could be a prime matchup for Romeo Doubs. He could be a great sleeper option this week. I think he have a huge week.
Yeah, it's hard to trust those Packers receivers. They have so many, and it seems like a different one goes off each week, but it's easier when they're hurt. So guys are hurt. It's less to choose from. Dobbs had a good game last week. So I think he could play well again this week. I like that call on him. All right, my next sleeper is Tyler Algier, the running back with the Falcons, scored a touchdown last week. He has at least 7 carries every game this season. I know that Bijan Robinson's there. He's getting a lot of playing time, but Algier still gets his weekly work. If he gets double-digit carries this week against the Bears, I think he could do well. Chicago is first overall against the run, but they still allow a lot of fantasy points to running backs. They allow the 8th most fantasy points to running backs, despite being first overall against the run, which is kind of crazy to me. So they've obviously allowed some rushing touchdowns, allowed some work in the passing game to running backs also. So I think Algier is a decent flex play this week in this matchup where I think the Falcons could be running the ball also a lot this week in this one because they like to run the ball. And you never know what Arthur Smith's going to do also. It seemed like he made it a point to get Robinson a little more involved last week, but I just don't trust him. Is there a more frustrating coach in the game than Arthur Smith, Henry?
There's not. I don't know how you have Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, and Drake London, and your favorite option is Jonnu Smith. That's a pretty interesting one to me.
Oh man, I agree. He's just so frustrating. I just don't get it. You use such a high draft pick on Bijan and not utilize him. You watch him play. He's got to get 20 plus touches a game. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
I
he
don't
looks
get it.
phenomenal when he gets the ball. I just don't know why they don't. They could give it to him every play probably when they win a game, but I mean,
May
Arthur
not
Smith.
may not be good for his health, but you're right. If he got the ball more, they'd be a lot better team. And they're still in the playoff hunt somehow, despite all these issues they've had offensively this year. They need to get a QB also. So anxious to see how
The
they
big thing with that Atlanta team though playing well is they've really built a pretty good defense on that other side of the ball. That
they
helps
have.
them because Arthur Smith can't ruin that part of their team.
That's true. He cannot. He is not in charge of that. Maybe they get Russell Wilson next year. What do you think? That'd be a good
I don't
fit.
think that helps a ton right there.
No, where do you think Russell Wilson lands next year? What's your
I
first
mean, that's
thoughts
a
there?
tough call. I don't know what to say about that. I saw some people saying Vegas was an option. I think that was a bad idea. So some people really want to go back to Seattle, but I don't see how Seattle wants to do that after what all happened. But speaking of Russ Wilson, I think that trade could go down as one of the worst in NFL history.
Oh
Looking
yeah,
back at that,
I
the
agree.
Seattle got 2 top 5 picks from that plus more. I mean, and now the Broncos are to deal with that contract. It's not a
I
pretty
like
one.
I like Vegas as an option for him. I don't think that's a bad call. Just a could be a good fit. Jimmy Garoppolo, obviously not their future, even though they spent a lot of money on him. Now they got rid of the coach who wanted him. So I don't think Wilson in Vegas. I kind of like that. That's a good call.
I
I hadn't
believe
thought
with
about that.
Denver, though, the reason that why they would want to get out of contract now is mostly because of how stacked this draft class is of QBs. There's a lot of good QB talent in this draft class. They're going to try to
That
move
is
on one and try to create a future.
that is a good call there. All right, let's talk about another one of our sleepers for the week. Give me your next one on your list there, Henry.
I'm going to make sure I pronounce this right, but Chigakonkwo with Tennessee is coming off probably his best game of the year last week. I know it was Ryan Tannehill starting, but if he starts again, I believe that's a big part of why he's helped a lot of fantasy teams. But he plays the third worst team against fantasy tight ends. It's Houston. He had caught a touchdown, I believe, last week, even though it was from Derrick Henry. It's an interesting one. But I mean, he can have a huge week. I mean, he's got a lot of passes lately. He's been more of a safety blanket for the Tennessee QBs. I think he have a good week this week.
Yeah, I like a Conqueror. I actually have him ranked 10th on my tight end list this week. He's been playing really well. Not gaudy numbers, but consistent. So I think a Conqueror could do well again this week. I think that's a good call. I have Marvin Mims on my list. So little scary. I know Russell Wilson's not starting. They're going with Jared Stidham. So that's a little scary, but I still think that he could do well in this matchup because Cortland Sutton, I don't think he's going to play. He hasn't practiced yet this week. Got knocked out of the game last week, a concussion. So that means Mims gets more work. He had 63 yards last week. That was his highest total since week 3. He's an explosive player. He does well with the ball in his hands, makes things happen. I think he could be worth a shot in deeper formats. Also has a great matchup. Chargers are just a mess defensively. They allow the third most fantasy points to receivers, ranked 30th overall against the pass. I think that's another reason uh, it makes sense for the Broncos to make this change. I know they're doing it for financial reasons, but it's going to make Stidham look pretty good going up against this Chargers defense, in my opinion. Don't you think that maybe had a little something to do with it at this time of the year?
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, that Chargers team just looks pitiful at this point.
Yep. I agree. All right, Henry, we got another question in the chat. It's a good one, another tight end one. Gerald Everett or Jawan Johnson? Unfortunately, this owner Caden had Hawkinson on his team, and he's in the championship game. He needs Everett or Johnson. I think I know who you're going to say, but go ahead and
Now,
go
see,
for it.
I had the same issue. I'm in championship. Hawkinson went down. I'm gonna go with Gerald Everett this week. I have him on my sleeper list. He just got a great matchup, and he's been pretty good as of recently. I think he's a very safe floor at the minimum, and he could explode. I mean, he's got to start catching touchdowns. I think that's a big thing with him.
Yeah, and Johnson's the opposite. He's more of a touchdown dependent player. He has not topped 50 yards in a game this year. He has touchdowns 2 straight games though. So he still has double digit fantasy points 2 straight games, 3 times this season. So pretty good ceiling, but I just think Everett's probably the safer play. At least 4 catches, 5 straight games. Like you said, just not finding the end zone, kind of the only thing holding him back. So I think Everett is probably the way I would lean. I think they're kind of similar plays. Johnson's a little more touchdown dependent. I think Everett, though, could really produce big, like you mentioned, if he finds the end zone. So I think I would lean him. Also, it doesn't look like Keenan Allen's going to play again this week. He's still not practicing on that heel injury. I don't think it makes sense to rush him back. They're playing for nothing. So as long as Allen's out, I think Everett is looking like a really good play this week. So
At this point,
I'd
the
probably
Chargers should just not play him, basically. They just gotta get a better draft pick at this point, help the rest of the help that defense out that does not look good. They gotta go into rebuild mode, it seems.
That's true. I thought their defense was going to be good this year. I'm really
I mean,
baffled by
Keel
it.
Mack up for a while was up there as a sack leader, and they still couldn't do anything defensively. They have they have so many stars in the defense. They pay them so much money, and they still can't stop anyone, which doesn't make
No,
any
they
sense.
they cannot stop everyone, especially anyone, especially through the air.
Mhm.
But I would Henry and I both think we would lean Everett here, but Johnson's not a bad play either. All right, Henry, one more sleeper for the week. I actually have a tight end as my last sleeper, not one mentioned here, but who's your last sleeper?
I have a wide receiver. I have Noah Brown. This basically all depends. I need CJ Stroud to play, but when Stroud's playing, he really looks his way. And if there be no Tank Dell the rest of the year, and we haven't seen a game, I believe, yet where Noah Brown and it's just CJ Stroud, him and Nico Collins, since Tank Dell's gone down, since Stroud went down almost immediately. But they have a prime matchup this week against Tennessee, who is the fifth worst against the pass against wide receivers in fantasy. I mean, he could have a huge week, especially with their not being tanked out. I mean, Schultz has been playing well, we should know, and so is Nico. But I think Noah Brown would be a great sleeper play this week.
I like that. My sleeper, like I mentioned, it's a tight end. It's Kylan Granson. So a little scary to start him in an unknown situation in Indianapolis a little bit, but he's been really good. He has 50 plus yards, 2 of 4 games, double digit fantasy points, 2 of those games. Season high 7 targets last week. Good matchup against the Raiders this week as well. If you're looking for a tight end, you're in deeper formats. I think Granson could be a guy that ends up helping fantasy teams this week. I think he's really emerging as that go-to tight end. I know Mo Alley Cox is there, but he's more of the blocking tight end, gets work around the red zone. But Granson's the guy that catches the ball, and I still think he could do well in this matchup. All right, Henry, let's get to one more question. The same owner who had Everett and Johnson, he actually had Keenan Allen as well, which is not funny for him, unfortunately.
Impressive that
But
he's made the championship, it seems.
yeah, good work there with the rest of your team. So he's deciding between Demarcus Robinson, KJ Osborne, and
Ooh.
Dobbs. I think it's between Osborne and Dobbs personally. It's a close call with those two. I would keep an eye on the injury report when it comes to Jordan Addison. If Addison's out, I might have a hard time sitting Osborne. I just think he might have a higher ceiling just with the way they've been throwing the ball. So I might lean Osborne over Dobbs. You had Dobbs on your sleeper list. What do you think?
So I'll give my opinions on Dobbs since you already expressed your opinions on Osborne, but I'd keep also another look at the Packers injury report. You got to see if Watson and Jaden Reed both play or not. If they both don't play, Dobbs could have a huge week. I know Wicks is also there, and he's played very well recently. But Dobbs, I believe, also got a touchdown last week. I could see him getting 1 or 2 even maybe this week if they're both out. He could have a great year, a great game this year.
So you like Dobbs. I probably lean Osborne. It's a close call. Robinson's been really consistent as well. I don't like the fact he's the third option in that passing game behind Nakua and Cup. So that scares me a little bit, even though he's been consistent. But I still think he might have the lowest floor of the three. I think Osborne might have the highest ceiling, and I think Dobbs might be the safest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I
So
think I agree with that.
yeah. All right, Henry. It's been a fun show. Didn't get a ton of questions, which is unfortunate because that means a lot of the people who normally watch lost. So I don't like to see that.
Not
Unfortunately, but good luck to everybody out there in your championship games this week. Hopefully you come out victorious. I know I'm excited. Have some tough decisions as well, though, especially with my QB tonight. I'm still trying to figure out what to do there, Henry. I'm really, really torn on the Flacco, Brissett, and
yeah.
Nick Mullins situation. I'm not happy about it. Not happy at all. Any other things bothering you with your fantasy lineups at all? Anything you're
I really
concerned
don't
about?
know what to do if I flex in my wide receiver too. I mean, I feel like they're all similar options. It's hard what to do. I have debate between Godwin and Terry McLaurin at wide receiver 2. Usually I just go with Godwin, or usually I have Waddle, but I'm assuming he's not going to play.
Yeah, I don't think he's
But
playing.
I would just go Chris Godwin, but then McLaurin had his huge blow-up game when Brissett played the second half of that game, so it's hard to feel like I bench him. So that's just San Francisco not being the best against the pass this year. That's another thing.
Yeah,
And with the
Godwin.
flex, it's either whoever I don't play or then Javonte Williams, who I was going to start, but now I'm worried that they're not going to do anything offensively with Stidham at quarterback.
That's a concern, but they could run the ball more with Stidham at
That is
quarterback,
true.
and it's a good matchup against a bad defense. So I think I would lean Williams at your flex. And Godwin, man, he had a 100-yard game against New Orleans in Week 4, and that was when he wasn't really playing great. He has double-digit targets 3 straight games as well. I like McLaurin too, but I just think Godwin might be the way I would lean here. It's a close call, though.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you have in your lineup right now?
Right now, I have Godwin and McLaurin. And I also could, I don't know if I want to bench him, I could bench Pollard too.
I don't know what I would do there. I don't think I can bench Power. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
That's tough.
I
I
just
mean, if
need
you really
Hill
want
and
to take a
Josh Allen.
chance, you could. Yeah, that's scary. Tough decisions there. A lot of people, I'm sure a lot of people are facing similar decisions because there's been a lot of injuries, just a lot of guys hurt, a lot of guys underperforming as well, like you mentioned, like Pollard, and then even like Stephon Diggs, like someone was talking about. So it's tough. It's
Mhm.
going to be a tough championship week. I'm sure there's some teams that have Raheem Mostert and Christian McCaffrey on their team, and Josh Allen, and some stack lineups, and they're not coming up with these tough
Tyreek.
decisions. But there's definitely some other teams like us and have some tough decisions to make.
Yeah, like with that team though, like I still had Josh Allen, Tyreek Hill. That's the big focal point of that team. The rest of the team's just eh.
Yeah.
Helps when you have an elite tight end in Hawkinson, but now I don't have that.
Yep, that's true. And you can win with different combinations. I've said it before, I'll say it again.
Mhm.
I won a championship, I don't know how many years ago it was now, 6, 7 years ago, with Tyler Thigpen as my starting quarterback. I mean, who would have thought that?
That's
You can
some decision to even start him that week.
Yeah, he was red hot down the stretch. He started playing because of injury, producing good numbers. It was a touchdown only league. So I went with Tyler Thigpen. I think he got me 2 or 3 in the championship game, but you can win with different combinations. The best teams don't always win, unfortunately. I hate to say it. So I say this a lot as well. Just get in. You just want to get in.
Yeah.
That's all you want to do. Anything can happen. These championship games. It's a lot more fun when you win, but it's an accomplishment just to make it there as well. So kudos to you if you're in your championship games this week, and good luck to you. So Henry, thanks again for joining me on the show. It was a lot of fun talking with you. So good luck to you in your games this week. Again, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Good luck to you as well.
All right. I hope I come out victorious in a lot of my leagues as well. I had a really good season, hoping I finish strong. Never know what's going to happen, though. Again, good luck to everybody out there in your championship games. This has been Jeff Power with Real Time Fantasy Sports. Have a great day, everyone.